Our message today is going to be done in three parts, so we're going to kind of have a little different flow of our service today. It's based on Paul's letter to the church at Corinth in the 3rd chapter. Now, Corinth is not the example of the kind of church that our church ought to be. Just get that clear. If you've read it through, you know that it's the place where Paul many times spoke truth in love because they weren't being God's people as they ought. In this particular section, he's reminding us all together about how we are to live as a rock, as Christ is our rock. And so we hear now from the 3rd chapter of Paul's first letter to the Corinthian church. He says this: "According to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid the foundation, and someone else is building on it. Each builder must choose with care how to build on it, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one that has been laid. That foundation is Jesus Christ." And then in verse 16, he asks this question: "Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person, for God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. Do not deceive yourselves. If you think that you are wise in this age, you should become fools so that you may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. For it is written, He catches the wise in their craftiness. And again he says, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are hostile and futile. So let no one boast about human leaders, for all things are yours, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or the present or the future, all belongs to you, and you belong to Christ, and Christ belongs to God." This is God's word for us. Thanks be to God. Amen. Would you pray with me? Have thine own way, O Lord, have thine own way. You are the potter, and I am your clay. So speak through me, O God. May my words be your words. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. Amen. Well, I don't know how many of you did, but I hope you got a rock. In fact, I'm going to ask Todd, maybe if you didn't get a rock, would you hold up a hand and we'll pass some rocks around. You really need this today, not to throw at the preacher. 22 people, I counted 22 people at the first service said to me, "Oh, so these are to throw at the preacher if he's really bad, huh?" Now, the choir wouldn't and the band wouldn't appreciate it either. So, but we're going to talk today about rocks. And the first thing I want to talk about in this first section is that Christ is my rock. Christ is my rock. I, went to undergrad at IU. And, you know, you have to have some of those general electives. And so one of the general electives I took was Geology 101. I was never very good at it, but I enjoyed the studying about rocks. So there are the three types of rocks that the geologists usually say virtually all, there are some others, but virtually all rocks are in these three. And those three types are igneous, which means fire, or rocks under pressure. Think about volcanoes and lava molten and that becomes solidified. That's igneous rock or fire. And then you have metamorphic rock, which means meta means change, morphic means changed, moved to something else. And so it morphs to something else. And we have lots of that. And then the other type is sedimentary, which we know a lot about in Indiana. Limestone, sandstone, shale, are all those rocks? Well, I enjoyed that class about rock. I never was very good at it. I really struggled to get a B in that class, but I liked it. Here's what the Museum of Natural History said, which really was an astounding thought for me. Every person uses 3 million pounds of rocks in their lifetime. And you're thinking, what? We don't have a supply of rocks in the garage, or I don't have some in my bedroom. Well, but everything that we have is considered rock. The road you drove on here, what's it made of? The concrete, the asphalt has different kinds of rock in it. The asphalt itself is from the oil, the petroleum, which is part of the earth. So all of that, every person uses 3 million pounds of rocks. You know, rocks are important. Try to build a house without rocks and see how you do with that. Every concrete block is made of rock and cement and other things put together, which are things that have come from the earth. A lot of you probably have granite countertops at your home. That's rock. All the metal pipes, everything up here. This is metal, I think, isn't it, Jonathan? Yeah? Yeah, that's metal. The metal comes, it's mined out of the earth. You know how they do it? They mine it out of the rock, and then they distill and separate all the different parts. And iron ore comes from that in the earth, and then they heat it and separate it, and it becomes the hammer that you nail in. The nails come from that too. So much of what we have, and pottery and everything, all of it is about God. And the thing that I want you to think about is that rocks produce solid foundations. The children's story today, going to talk a little bit about that, isn't it, Katie? Yeah. Rocks produce solid foundations. Rock is firm. It's made under pressure. That's why I want you to have a rock. I want you to think about this. And I want you to think with me about the fact that Christ is to be your rock. Christ is my rock. That's what I want us to think about. Paul said that our lives are to be built on a solid foundation, a foundation that is hard as rock, and that rock is Christ. That Christ is to be my rock. Christ is to be the rock that sustains me through all the struggles and all the frustrations and all the worries. Christ is my rock. Well, we can have all kinds of other foundations, and you see it all the time. You know, people say, well, my world's going to be my career, or my world's going to be amassing the greatest amount of money I can, or my rock is going to be my kids. I'm going to pour everything into those kids. And then what happens when one of the kids have difficulties? The parents are often not the rock that child needs. Christ is the only rock, the only solid foundation on which your life can be built. On Christ, the solid rock I stand, the hymn says, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. And so for Christ to say, and for us to say that Christ is my rock, is to acknowledge that we've got to be dependent on something and someone other than me. If it's only depends on me, I know how dependable I am, and you know how dependable you are, and sometimes that ain't so dependable, is it? But there is one who is always there for us, one who is a solid foundation. You know, I could drop that rock 1,000 times, it wouldn't be changed a bit, because it's built of solid, it has a solid core to it. As we build our lives on Christ, we become a solid core. Christ is the hope. We are strongest when we depend upon Jesus. Virtually the strongest people I've seen, and I think of people that I've had the opportunity to be with them when they've lost a loved one at the bedside, or I think about, as a cop chaplain, the number of homicides and suicides and natural deaths, hundreds that I went to, and the people that seemed to be able to deal with that horrible, horrific loss in their lives were those that had a foundation. Those that had a rock on which their life was built. And that rock is Christ. So I want you to think this morning as we continue to worship, can you say that Christ is your rock? And can you live it and mean that Christ is your rock?
Okay, good morning. We're going to talk about a word that Pastor Bert was talking about a little bit ago, a really long word, and that word is foundation. Have you guys heard that word foundation before? You've heard that before, Ian? That doesn't surprise me because I know you're a builder. Yeah, so foundation has to do with building. Do any of you build things with blocks, like maybe these kind of blocks or Legos or wooden blocks or something like that? Do any of you build things? Yeah, that's awesome. So when you build, the thing that you start with is the foundation. So that's where that word comes from. And buildings like this one have a foundation too. So we're going to do a little building experiment today. We're going to try building a building whose foundation is this pillow. Do any of you start with a pillow when you build at home? No, that's kind of silly. Someone told me at the 9 o'clock service that they make pillow forts. And they start with a pillow with their pillow fort. That was really smart thinking. You do that. So, but if you're building with wooden blocks or these cardboard blocks or Legos, you probably don't start with a pillow, right? Unless you're building with all pillows. Well, we're going to try it out. We're going to start with this pillow, and we're going to make just a straight tower right on top of this pillow. I'm going to give you some people a block and let them we'll make a stack right on here and see how that works. You want to put that one on Carly? You want to put that one on Maeve? Lulu? Help me out. Thanks, Lulu. Anybody else? Let's let someone else have a chance. Thank you. You want to try, Corbin? You want to try? Oh. Got it. Sydney, you want to put that one on? Okay, so we have our tower here on our pillow foundation. It's kind of wobbly. Oh, Sydney's going to get fancy. Oh. Let it go if it's going to go. That's our point today. Whoa, there we go. Okay. So, the pillow was maybe not the best foundation. Okay, so we're going to try, and it wasn't Sydney's fault. Sydney, it wasn't your fault. Thank you for being the final brick. So, that pillow maybe wasn't the best foundation. So, we're going to try a different foundation. We're going to start with this block. And this is our foundation block. I did put Jesus on it. Thanks for reading that for us, Corbin. So it says Jesus because if Jesus is our foundation, maybe it will turn out a little bit differently. So if you didn't get to put a block on the first time, if you'd like to come try putting a block on this time, you didn't get to put one on last time, Patrick? All right. Let's see. Oh, Lulu, why don't you let someone else have a turn, okay? We're going to make our tower this time with this block. There you go. Want to try that one, Aiden? Want to try that one, Quinn?
It's on the right side.
Thank you. Go ahead and have a seat. Oh, thank you. So this time it's a little more stable. It's going to stay up there for us. And it worked a little bit better. That's good. That's a good thing. So this foundation is different from our other foundation, and we will keep talking about what that means to make Jesus our foundation. Okay, will you all pray with me? Dear God, thank you for sending us Jesus to be our foundation, for giving us the message in your word that Jesus is our firm foundation, and that foundation, that rock foundation in Jesus is the best one for us to build our lives on. Help us to continue learning and understanding what that means. In your name we pray. Amen. Thanks. Could I have a couple people grab a block and put it back in my basket for me? And then you may go back to sit with your family or come with me to kids' church.
One of the great things about a marvelous children's story like that is if you don't get it the other way, you definitely got it there, didn't you? Katie, that was awesome. I talked to you about inviting you to think about Christ is my rock. Now I want you to think with me about Christ is your rock. You know, I've said rocks make solid foundations. Our house is like perhaps yours. We have a basement. And our foundation, we have concrete blocks all the way around it. Our house was built in the late 60s. And every morning I do my prayer walking. I pray for all the people that are on my prayer list and others as their needs in the congregation. So I'll spend maybe 30 or 45 minutes. Somebody said to me, "Don't you get bored just walking around in the circle in the basement?" No, because I'm really focused on praying. Well, anyway, so as I'm praying, one day I was down there and I looked, and it looked like our wall was beginning to bow in at the top. And I thought, that's really weird. So I had my brother, who knows a lot about these things, come and look at it, and he said, "Yeah, you need to have one of those companies come, and they'll put these big metal plates on the wall, and then they'll drive this rod way out into the outside into the yard, and then they'll send another plate down, and then they'll tie it together and screw it to make it tight, a strong metal cable, so that foundation will be solid again." He said, "We guarantee it will never be worse. It'll always get better. It'll always stay in the way." Well, that's what it is when Jesus is our foundation. Rocks make the rock of Christ being your foundation will make you solid. Rocks are important. Rocks have been used in construction, in primitive dwellings. Some of the anthropologists have done research for thousands and thousands of years. People have used rocks to build things. The early Christians, when they were persecuted, you know where they went? They went into the caves, the rocks, and hid there and safely. That's where we found all the versions of the Scripture virtually that totally re-understood our meaning of Scripture. When we got those Qumran scrolls, they were in rock. And they pulled them out. They'd been in there for 2,000 years almost. And they pulled them out and discovered those rocks had kept them safe. Rock is a great thing for construction, and it keeps us safe. Then as we progress, we made tools out of the soils of the earth. And so your hammer comes from iron ore that's been mined, and then they heat it up and shape it, and then they cool it off, and then they reheat it, and that tempering of the metal, that forging of it, makes it even stronger. As Christ is our rock, we are tempered with that love. And so we learned how to remove all those things and make great things. Now, Indiana is awesome for rocks. I don't know if you knew this or not. I love Indiana history, and I love probably one of my favorite things in the whole world to do is just Deb and I love to wander Indiana. And so if you wander down in the southwest part of the state where Billy and his parents are here from Newburgh today, in the town where they live is one of the largest aluminum processing plants in the nation. It's Alcoa, Aluminum Company of America. And I've learned a lot from my soon-to-be daughter-in-law. Her dad is a chemist for Alcoa. And what he told me is they mine all this bauxite. They take it out of the earth. They refine it. The chemists do their magic on it. And then they heat it up and make it into, then they finally, it becomes this molten, and then they flatten it out. And all the Coke and Pepsi cans that I've drunk from all these years, most of them came from Newburgh, Indiana. Indiana is a hub for that. Or if you drive a little bit northeast of there, you'll come to a little place called Martin County, which is not a lot there. Shoals and Lagodi are two tiny little towns. And if you're not from Indiana, you don't know how to pronounce Lagodi because it's Loogottee, and everybody wants to say Lagodi. No, if you're from there, it's Lagodi. It's just like if you're from Brazil, Indiana, the natives there, they don't call it Brazil, they call it Brazil. Indiana, a crazy thing. Well, anyway, so if you go to Martin County and you get to a little town called Shoals or the little town of Lagodi, right between those two is a giant plant. Gypsum is mined there. Most of what we call sheetrock or drywall, as you probably know it as, it covers your ceiling and all your walls. Indiana is the 5th largest gypsum producing place in the nation. But the thing that we're known about most is rock. Indiana rock, Indiana limestone. It's even named Bedford limestone for the city from which it comes. Did you know the great Lincoln Memorial in Washington is made of Indiana limestone. Did you know the Capitol building? You go to visit the Capitol, it's Indiana limestone. All over the world, some of the the refurbished 9/11 memorials made of Indiana limestone. Virtually all the buildings at Indiana University are made of limestone. Now, Purdue decided on brick, the inferior product, but we at IU picked that great Indiana. That's not an anti-Purdue statement. You hope you get that. But limestone is an amazing thing. It's beautiful. It lasts for centuries because it was made under pressure. And these sedimentary rock, these layers of layers, just kept pressing down. And it becomes this great thing. Now, as we think about that, Christ is to be that rock for us. Did you know that even animals use rocks? The chicken on the left, some of you, I remember my aunt when I was a child had chickens. They raised chickens, and I remember going there one time, and I saw the chickens down there eating these little stones that my uncle had thrown in there. I said, why aren't they eating the corn? Well, they eat the stone because it helps them to break down the corn and to break down their diet. And there's a crocodile on the right. Oh, she's a mean croc. If you're too young, you may not get that one, but the crocodiles eat giant amounts of rock to help them digest their food. Rock is used in so many things. In the same way, Christ as your rock will be the only foundation that will keep you going through your life. When the storms of life are raging, the only foundation that will keep you secure is Christ. The only foundation that will always be there. You think, well, I can always depend on you fill in the blank, my spouse, my daughter, my father, whoever. But there may come a time when they're at the end of their resources, or they may have passed, or something else. You cannot lean on other people because people are people, and we're all human, and we have weaknesses. You can't always depend on even the people that you love the most, nor can they always depend on you. But the only one that really is the foundation upon which you can build your life is Jesus. He is the rock. He's the center of it all, as we sang. He is our hope and our help, that foundation which never ends. That's been put to the test this week for a really good friend of mine. It's Reverend Dennis Payton. He's pastor down at Mooresville. He is an awesome guy. He's got 2 sons. They've both gone into the ministry. They are 4th generation in a row. The family is an awesome family. Their son, this guy's son, is out at McCordsville. He's growing that church in amazing ways. Dennis and his wife, Tammy, they were awakened last Sunday morning at 2:20. They live out in the country. I've been to their place. It's neat. They're big horsemen, and they got horses and a barn and acreage and that. And so they were awakened at 2:20 in the morning with light, and there's no light where they are. And they woke up and looked out the window and discovered it was their home was on fire. Luckily, they awakened. Luckily, they fled. That's at the bottom is what it looked like after the fire. You can see there's still flames there. So I talked to my brother Dennis this week and said, "Brother, how you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm glad my life is based on something other than my house. Christ is my rock, my hope." He didn't even know I was preaching on that. Christ is my rock, my hope, and my help. When difficult times come, that's what we depend on. This picture right here, Deb and I were on vacation in Florida last week, and we went to a museum in Winter Park. It was a sculptor's home, actually. His name, he was a Czechoslovakian. Alban Palasic was his name. And he was a very devout Christian man, and much of his art had to do with this. Looks like you would often see perhaps in a Roman Catholic church where there are often crucifixes. But the difference here is most crucifixes have Jesus' head, his eyes closed, and his head hung in defeat. But Mr. Palasic saw Christ victorious. He made him with a smile on his face, looking up to heaven, and you could see the light that's shining on his face because he knows to whom he belongs. He knows that even though it's the end of his life, it's not the end of his life. Christ discovered that even his foundation had to be this God of hope, this God of blessing. Christ is your rock. Build on him, and you'll never fail. Thank you, Kaylee and band. Wow, that was awesome. I want to think with you now about, I've talked to you about Christ is my rock, Christ is your rock. Now I want you to think about with me that we are to be Christ's rock. We are to be Christ's rock in the world. To be Christ's rock means that we will be a solid foundation. That our lives, when the difficulties like a fire that takes our house, or someone we love that is struggling and we're grieving with them, that we'll be a rock. It means that we are to be hope and help to and for others. We are to be a rock. Just as Christ is our rock, we are to be a rock to others. One of the friends that I have says it this way. He says, go out and say a good word and do a good deed for Jesus today. I noticed in the newspaper this morning, there was an article, a new organization. They call themselves just Doing Good. That's what we Methodists have prided ourselves for 300 years, to being those who do good. To be hope and help for others. That's to be the rock. That's to do good for others. And we have a choice in this life, and we all know about that. We have a choice. And it's the biggest struggle of all. It's not to stand before your friends and others, but it's to stand in front of the mirror and look at the guy or gal that looks back at you and say, who am I going to live for? Am I just going to live for me? Is that what life's really about? Just getting all I can, doing all I can? You know, is that all your goal is? The history of our faith, the very witnesses, the people we call saints, the people who have sacrificed their lives, are those who have discovered we don't live for ourselves, we live for others. And so we have prayed this morning for our brother Gordon Mendenhall, who's gone to Belize to help people who never had eyeglasses. He's going to fit people. Can you imagine if you were 40, 50, 30, however years old, it doesn't matter, and you have an eye issue and you've never clearly seen, and then this guy comes and gives you a pair of glasses that match what the needs of your eyes are, and suddenly you see that child that you loved in clarity, or suddenly you get to read a book for the first time and the letters aren't jiggling together in your sight. That's doing for others, and that's what we're all to do. That's the goal of the Christian, to live in the world, to be a rock for somebody else. To be a rock of hope for somebody else. It's not all on us. I don't mean it that way. What I mean is we are to do all the good we can for all the people we can. That's what Mr. Wesley said. Do all the good you can for all the people you can, at all the times you can, in all the places you can, for all the people you can, as long as ever you can. We're to be the rock for others. We went on vacation in Winter Park. We went to a museum there of this sculptor, and you saw another one of his. This is his self-identified. This is how he sees himself. You may not be able to read it on there, but the title of it is Man Carving His Own Destiny. And this Czech guy, his family was persecuted by the Nazis. He was able to come to this country, and out of celebration for that, he carved this. It's his understanding of his own life. And you can't read that, but this is his interpretation of that piece, carving his own destiny. This is what he said about it. He said, I am like a piece of rock which has been broken off of the Carpathian Mountains, the mountains in Czechoslovakia from where he comes. Later, this crude stone was transported to the land of the free, the USA. This block of stone was me, was myself, he said. Through the opportunities that this country has given me, I started to carve out my destiny, to free myself from the rock that I might be useful. No one has known the deep gratitude I feel for all that I have received. And then he says this about, boy, if this doesn't preach today, I don't know what does. He said, so if as an immigrant, I've been able to contribute in some small way to the part of the American life, I know that I owe it to the opportunities that this country opened to me. Gratitude for the life that he had, carving out of his own life. He understands himself to be something that God is carving. And the freedom of this country has allowed him to be all that he could be. But when we are Christ, and when we are Christ's rock, Christ shapes our destiny. But some of us have not yet set Christ as your rock. And I want you today, that's why I want you to, if you didn't pick one up on the way in, pick one up on the way out, grab a rock, take it home, set it on your kitchen table. And every time your family or whatever is your family makeup at this point, as you stop for a meal, offer thanks. And then I invite you to say this little litany for this week. Christ is my rock. I'll be Christ's rock. Christ is my rock. I will be Christ's rock. Imagine how different our world will be if we let Christ be our rock. And then we become Christ's rock to the world.